For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:05 on today's Entrepreneur. Welcome to the show, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Good evening, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And tonight on the program, we'll be profiling Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom. And we spoke to Jamie before in the program.
We have, and it's always a fascinating story with Jamie because we get to talk about China, the ins and outs, and all the, not all the dirty little secrets, but certainly, he spends a good half of his time there during the year. So it's a lot of interesting stories that will come out.
But first, let's chat about some entrepreneurial news of the day, and we'll get to the gumball machine story in a second because I find that one so fun. But interesting story about young entrepreneurs in the Financial Post, how young entrepreneurs are building businesses by solving their grandparents' problems. What kind of problems are we talking about?
It's really, they realize there's an aging population. So solving their grandparents' problems is, okay, now we need homes for them, or we need whatever services, whatever elderly services are required, and it's really ensuring that there's enough supply for all the demand that's coming out there. So when you have the younger generations realizing, hey, it's not a bad real estate play, and it's a great service industry, and you know what, people are paying for it. There's certainly people are getting insured for some of this, that for longer term disability and for elder care care with certainly. And the insurance salesmen are all over selling this. It's there's an absolute business. So it's understanding the aging community, and certainly as we see in many parts of the world. But that's really what the article's about. It's about that younger generation realizing, hey, wait a second, aging population, a whole demographic. We think there's not enough supply for the demand that's there, and taking charge and running with it.
More trouble for department stores, or is it trouble? Sears Canada announcing that they're selling off some more real estate. Is that a sign that that old department store may be in trouble?
Well, if you take their spin on it, well, first of all, we always think that Sears is in trouble, and sometimes I can't believe that they've been around this long. Then again, they do have a ton of real estate, and they do have a phenomenal list of assets and dollars on their balance sheet, and that's their stores, that's their warehouses, that's the locations that they've built up over decades and decades and decades. Selling it off to hopefully bolster their their retail operations. I hope it's not too little too late, but it's a lot of money for the influx. It certainly has to cover some of the holes because retail for Sears is not absolutely flourishing. I mean, anybody that walks into a store can certainly see that. Any wholesaler that's selling to them, there's always difficult times. Some people can get lucky because they still need there's still goods that move, but maybe not as well as they used to. And obviously selling off the real estate for dollars is trying to help bolster their working capital and bolster their retail operations. They have a new CEO in place from a year or two ago, and really this is kind of the strategy is, okay, we need to come back into retail. There's a demand for it. At least that's what they believe. So how can we make it look better? How can they come up with the times? And I think they just haven't stayed with the times. And, we see, Dan, we talk about so many times retailers trying to reinvent themselves, trying to create a reason why they should walk into the store. I haven't seen Sears do that in I don't know how long. Can they do it this time with the extra money from the sale of these real estate locations? Who knows?
The story of Alibaba is really quite incredible. This is basically the Chinese Amazon.com, right? So they invented a holiday in the last few years, a Singles Day, and that day has become a spending spree to the point where they're breaking all the records. $207 million in 1 minute being spent. It's really quite incredible. Great story too, linking manufacturing commerce with rural China as well. What are your thoughts on Alibaba and its success and its what it says about the future of retail?
Well, certainly, listen, online sales have been fantastic all over the world. The fact that Alibaba is in a part of the world where you have billions of people shopping on their smartphones, and they communicate well and they market well to these people, I think is absolutely tremendous. I mean, the Black Monday here, or at least in the U.S., is really no comparison when you're talking about the volume. I'd almost turn to Jamie, our guest, and he's there half the year. And just wondering, from an Alibaba, what you see and hear in your part of the world out there.
Well, Alibaba that day was actually created by some single university students in Nanjing, China, in Jiangsu province. And Alibaba picked up on it and said, hey, this is a great retail opportunity. 1111 Singles Day, that's what it's going to be. It's really a phenomenon. They sold $11 billion in one day. By comparison, Black Monday was $3.67 billion, and it's or $5 billion, that's between $3 and $5 billion, and it was the largest single retail day in the United States. So they did that in 8 minutes in China. So the retail sales is big for Alibaba, but it's also big for Taobao and a bunch of other platforms. And if you're going to buy anything in China, no matter what it is, you go to a store to look at it, you go to a store to touch it and feel it, but you go online to buy it. And every single person, whether they're expats or Chinese citizens, that is the retail environment. That's exactly what you do.
So it's Alibaba taking advantage of what they know best in their consumer market.
What could retailers here learn from this kind of thing? I mean, it could be profitable to just invent a day sometimes, or invent a reason to have a sale.
Well, there's no question. If the fads that come out, that they jump all over it. It's like a Tickle Me Elmo that comes out at Christmas. It's on the shelf for a few minutes and it doesn't come out. Now this is on a much larger scale, because we're not talking about a few hundred people in the United States. We're talking about couple of billion people or a few billion people in that hemisphere, in that part of the world. Find one link that really can attract it, and everybody's shopping on their smartphones. Not everybody's shopping on their smartphones here. You have a lot, but not nearly as many as there. So when they can capitalize on that, it absolutely is huge.
The other thing that's so fascinating about Alibaba, it's not just consumers being exposed to different goods, but it's also people producing different goods, sometimes in really regional, far away places, now having access to whole new urban markets.
And that's right. It's, in other words, who can you sell to? The whole goal when you have a product is, where can I expand? Where can I show my product to? Where can it live so that anybody and everybody can buy it? Alibaba, it's a great place. Again, billions of people. Now, you have to have the right logistics. You have to be able to actually ship that product. You have to be able to get into the hands of the consumer, because if you can't get it there and you fall down on the job on your logistics part, well, then you're not going to sell too much after that.
Finally, speaking about innovation, let's talk about the gumball machine. So that iconic gumball machine, which is actually called the Beaver machine. I didn't know that. It's
I guess it's because you used to put a nickel in there. There's a beaver. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We won't go for any other reason.
So it's they're digitizing. The gumball machine is going to still exist, but in a bit of a new form.
Well, and I think it's a story about being with the times. It's a story about reinventing yourself. It's a story about not being in the dinosaur age, or realizing that you have a product that needs to evolve with the times. There's no question people still love gumball machines, but wouldn't it be cool if they didn't have to put a quarter in or a token in or whatever, and they either wave not a wand, but a card in front of it, or it can track what's actually coming out, or you can see it and say, okay, I've had 8 red ones and 3 green. I mean, there's so much that can be done to have fun with it, even more than just all the colorful balls in one location coming down. Just like we've seen the gumball machine, the evolution of just a single sphere develop into, you've seen these bigger ones that kind of, where the gumball, you push it and it goes down this whole maze and loops and whatever. I mean, there's so much that has been done with it. Now it's a question of technology, and it's a question of, okay, what can we digitize? What can we, what can we bling out of it? What can we have all the blinking lights, so that the next generation, the kids of today, not just the adults, certainly the kids of today with gumball machines, will go to it and say, hey, wow, lots of blinking lights, looks like so much fun. It's almost like a video game. That's where I want to put my money. So good on them for reinventing something that has been around forever.
And again, with that trend of keeping retail entertaining, right? Even if it's a really tiny retail business.
A reason to go in and buy it, absolutely.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD, we'll chat with our guest, Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom, about working with China this hour. That's coming up.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and FL for Landau's Josh Miller with you. And this evening, a returning champion, Josh. We have Jamie Kerr back from Fabco Customs. Welcome back to CJD, Jamie.
Thank you.
So,
Good to be back.
First question, pretty easy. Tell us about yourself and Fabco Custom.
Well, we are a contract manufacturer. And what that is, we make OEM equipment. We are the back factory for people who are no longer making it themselves, or if the production run is too large for the factory that they currently have. So that, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It doesn't really matter what the product is or in what domain. We are, as a contract manufacturing company, we have our engineers and we figure it out and we build the product and ship it. Not as an agent and not as a outsourcing company. We ship it as manufacturers.
So you basically you own the inventory at any given moment.
We take full responsibility. We own the inventory. We take full responsibility for the inventory. So it's as if the North American company is doing business with another North American company. Our factories just happen to be overseas.
Now
They could be anywhere.
Are your customers mostly North America, or do you have customers outside or in China?
I have customers all over the world. I have customers in Singapore. I have customers in Norway. I have actually, the evolution of my business is that I was flowing business or manufacturing from China to North America and Europe and Singapore. And now, in the last 3 years, we are manufacturing products for people in Canada and selling it to people in China. And that's the sort of turnaround that's happening in this day and age.
Now, you've been in China for many years.
Yes.
I mean, your first trip to China was what year?
My very first trip was 1989.
Now, maybe you can kind of describe the first trip or the second trip, or kind of what attracted you to China and conducting your business there.
Well, the first trip, I was working for a company, a Canadian footwear company, and I was the assistant to my boss. And my eyes were wide open, and everybody was just busy and doing their things. In 1989, you still had, if you were bringing rubber to a factory, it was pulled by an ox, or these machines that had these motors, almost like a tractor. And those days are long gone now. So now you have railroad and automotive thoroughfares that are just like fantastic.
No, the infrastructure they've created is
second to none. Second to absolutely none. Mind you, they don't transport a lot of their raw material or a lot of their goods. They transport raw materials, but they don't transport a lot of soft goods from north, south, east, and west via rail like we do. They still do it by truck, which is interesting. But they have their rail system is just unbelievable.
No, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is the infrastructure they created over the last number of years is really second to none, and it really very helpful. Now, when we come back from the break, I know there's this great story, your first foray into servicing and finding a product for a customer here, and that kind of really opened your eyes to how things work in China, and really how you had to set yourself up to make sure things run smoothly when we come back after the break.
Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom with us on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Back with Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom on today's Entrepreneur, talking about doing business, particularly with China, and some of the challenges there. Later on in the hour, we'll talk about tax challenges internationally as well, Josh.
Absolutely. Our partner, Nick Moraitis, will come on. But until we get there, I mean, so many fascinating stories. We can't get to them all. But Jamie, I know there's one of your first stories of your first experiences in manufacturing in China, maybe a little bit of a screw up, something you had to fix.
It was definitely a screw up.
Recount that story.
Well, we had a contract to manufacture flags for the Indianapolis 500, and it's a lot of flags, and it's complicated. It's a person's face, and it was for Smirnoff coolers, which is a specific color, and it has to be matched exactly because it's a promotional piece, and it's in a very premier venue.
Very visible, yes.
Yeah, very visible. So we went back and forth with the buyer and finally agreed upon the colors. It wasn't exactly right, but they accepted it. Okay, go, sign off, sent the sample back to the factory. We received the first off of the production, and all of the flags that were supposed to be this beautiful red were purple. And
Can't quite deliver that color to Smirnoff.
no, you can't put that up on the stands. And I had 2 weeks to fix the problem. And at that point, I had been in China previously with the company that I was working before, but I had never gone back. So I had to get a visa, get on a plane, and get to China, find a factory to remake all of these flags and fix the problem, or it was over. And I had a 2-week period to do it, and that's what really started me going in China, because we fixed the problem. We found the factory. We remade everything. We flew it to Indianapolis. They had them all installed in time for the race, and everything was fine. But at that point, I realized that anything can be done as long as you were there to do it.
There's the key, right? The key is boots on the ground, in their face. You always hear about the quality control, quality assurance. Would you say that was your almost biggest lesson from that?
That was I have never swayed from that lesson, and that was 15 years ago. So for the last 15 years, I have always gone to check my own. It's my goods, it's my money, it's my production. Mm-hmm. I'm responsible for it. My customers come to me. They don't care where I make it. They just care what I deliver. So to make it right, I have to be there to make it right.
Now, finding the factory 15 years ago versus today, how has it gotten easier? Is it still complicated? There's still some due diligence involved?
I would like to say that it is so simple now, but there's still no such thing as a directory. There's no yellow pages. Everything is done through a network of who you know, your guangxi. So your network of who you know and who you've done business with and who you're going to do business with and who you're friends with. Because as always, if you're not friends with the people, as opposed to here, where you don't want to be friends with your business people, there you have to be friends with your business people, or they won't do business with you, and really you shouldn't do business with them.
It's really, as you said, Guanxi, it's really, there's got to be a trust developed at some
Absolutely.
point before there's a dollar exchanged.
Absolutely, and a big trust, because you're entrusting them with your livelihood and your product and your money. So you really have to put your faith in what it is that they're doing.
Does it take long to establish?
It depends on how nice the people are.
The fact that you're physically there obviously makes it easier than if you were in North America trying to establish that same relationship.
When I started to actually speak Chinese instead of just English and French, life changed. Because then you listen to what everybody's talking about at the table, where before I was like a blind man and I couldn't see anything. My eyes were opened and I could hear and understand what everybody was saying to each other.
Excellent. I know when we come back, there's so much other. I mean, talk about having employees over there. I believe you work with a partner. So lots of things to talk about when we come back.
Talking about opportunities in China with Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:36 on Today's Entrepreneur. Welcome back. This is a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. And our guest this evening is Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom. I'm back on Today's Entrepreneur to talk about dealing with China, which you've been doing for 15, 20 years now, Jamie?
15 years of my own business and longer working for other people.
And now speaking the language too, which is. Did you have any moments where you thought that that provided you with a pretty clear competitive advantage?
Many moments, when you when you don't reveal that you speak the language and you understand what everybody's talking about, there are no longer any secrets. So you can sit around a table, and if it's a shady supplier and they're trying to deal between themselves and saying, okay, well, let's see if we can up the price with this guy and he doesn't know any different, and you understand everything that they say, it provides a definite advantage.
Do you still use that advantage today?
Every day. I'll never give that one up. That's a really handy handy thing to have.
Now, you're not in this business alone. You did take on a partner a little while back. Why? Like, what's the importance of having a partner?
Well, as an entrepreneur, the road to success is the guy that realizes what they can't do. You always know what you can do, and also as an entrepreneur, you're always there for the next gig or the next job or whatever you're going to do next. But it's the realization of what I can't do. So I took on. Well, I didn't take on a partner. I married myself with the partner, and they are a financial whiz. Which is not my strengths. Administration and finance is not my strength. My strength is engineering and manufacturing. So these are things that now I don't have to worry about. So I'm not clouded with having to worry about all the invoicing and the receivables and payables and taxes and this and that and all that. I can concentrate fully on what I do best, which is producing high quality product in a place that's, very far away, so it's 10,000 kilometers away, and I'm producing the goods as if they were right next door. To do that, I need to concentrate on what I do.
And of course, again, 10,000 miles away, it's product, it's customers, it's suppliers in China. Did cash flow issues ever come into play? The management of cash flow certainly has to come into play.
It's more the management of cash flow, because a lot of companies work with deposit and production the same way that most companies in China work. You have to sort of follow the same rules. But it's the management of your cash flow that's the real tricky part, and how to keep the as an entrepreneur in the beginning, I didn't go to school to be an entrepreneur. Nobody does. So I always thought, oh, well, I'll let my tax bill go to the end of the year and figure out how much I have to pay. And that is a disaster. You need to pay as you go all the way along. And if you pay as you go, and this is part of the management that a financial person brings to you. So as an entrepreneur that's an engineer, I don't think about those things. I think about my structure, and I think about my tensile strength, and I think about my product of how it's going to be, and the logistics and how it's going to get to the customer on time. I don't think about, I need to retain this to pay it later.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Human resources. Employees here, North America, employees in China. There's definitely different dealings with them, and I'm not talking about the compliance issues of filing tax papers and all that. It's just the human side of it, the management side of it. Maybe you can kind of describe, or maybe pick a difference or two between here and there, something you had to learn.
It depends on the level of employee that you have. If you have the guy that works on the floor, you're like a parent. We have an assembly factory now, and we use subcontractors. So my assembly guys, I'm their parent. I provide them their livings, but I also have to provide them sometimes moral guidance, and I have to provide them all their food, and I have to provide them a place to sleep or transportation to and from their home. There's many things that you don't have to do when you're in North America with, here you provide a paycheck. And everybody takes care of themselves, and you provide a nice, clean working environment. There you have to provide, and especially with the competition now, not everybody wants to work in whatever factory that you have. So you have to vie for the worker to come and work for you rather than somebody else.
You really have to offer some incentives.
Absolutely. Whether the incentive is what we would call a pizza day, and there it's not pizza, but or something like this to make the environment friendly. The guys that do this really well are, even though Foxconn has been slammed for the way that they their employees have sort of reacted over the last couple of years, but you have to remember there's 1.2 million employees. So out of 1.2 million employees, you're going to have some people that have some issues. But they have their own hospitals, they have their own police force, they have their own concessionaires, everything. That's what you have to do.
So with
on a smaller scale.
Of course. Now for you mentioned competition and vying to, for talent, which certainly in North America, there's always a struggle for talent. Are you saying that in China too, it's tough to find talent these days?
It's tough to find talent, and because
and to keep it, of course.
well, always to keep it, but the migration of workers from the rural parts of China has slowed. So to get the guy to work on your factory floor is as hard, or almost harder, than it is to get an engineer. It's easier to get an engineer because there's lots of them in school, and they're very talented, very smart guys.
And they're mobile.
And they're mobile, and they can come to wherever it is that you're going to be. But get the worker on the floor, that's, at this day and age, is a little more difficult.
Now, cost of labor. Everybody, has heard over many years, and you've been there since 1989. Cost of labor, always cheap in China, but certainly not as cheap today as it used to be.
No.
So,
well, for a lot
what's
of
the evolution of the cost of labor?
Well, the cost of labor is, the minimum wage in China is 14 RMB an hour. So 14 RMB an hour is like $3 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so your factory cost for your laborer is around $5 an hour. So you can plan that is what it is, multiplied by the amount of people having doing it.
It's quite an increase from the last 15, 20 years.
Well, it's an increase because that's the RMB cost, but the American dollar cost or Canadian dollar cost has changed because that's changed by 20% due to the exchange.
Right.
So that's an even bigger cost increase. So it makes it, you have to be very good at producing your product and have no mistakes and no returns. And the most, for the most part, everybody understands that in China these days.
Now, just quickly as we get to but just before the next break, we have a few seconds. Pricing over the years, did you find it a struggle? What's been your strategy to price your product, certainly given all the moving parts in China?
Well, I always price my product completely in Chinese dollars and never change from that. So I price it so I have a fixed rate of what my product will cost on the Chinese market. And then I'll fluctuate with the exchange, or I build a buffer with the exchange. But it's always a fixed cost in Chinese dollars. And that's the safest way to go.
Excellent. I know there's so much we can talk about, and I'm sure you have tons of stories that you can and cannot tell. But it's great so far, Jamie. Thanks very much. We'll chat a little bit more right after this.
And Jamie's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. Nick Moraitis will join us next, tax partner at Fuller Landau, on some tax challenges when you're dealing internationally.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, chartered professional accountants and business advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you, and Jamie Kerr, our profile tonight of Fabco Custom. We'll have Jamie's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. But first, Nick Moraitis, tax partner at Fuller Landau, on some international tax challenges, and I guess this can get complicated when you do business overseas.
Dan, you're selling overseas, you're buying from overseas, maybe you're setting up a structure, or a company, or subsidiary, or there's a parent overseas. Lots of things to consider. So, Nick, I guess as you stare at your list of things to mention, what would be the top 1, 2, 3 on your list?
Everything is, but as Jamie was mentioning, when you're a Canadian entrepreneur, obviously exporting is a big part of your growth strategy. And if you're getting into start working with other countries, you have to realize that those other countries have taxes, and they have laws, and they have regulations that we are now subject to, and we fall into their orbit. And what you're really looking to do is, if you're looking to set up shop either as an office to sell, or you're looking to set up for the supply chain part of it, you really have to find out, well, what does the country expect of you as it being a non-resident, a non-local, to deal with the taxes there. And we have all sorts of taxes, not just the income taxes. There could be the sales taxes. There could be an asset-based tax. It could be a sales-based tax. There's withholding taxes. There's payroll taxes. There's licenses and that you may require that you need to validate and verify once you get into it. Many times, many companies don't bother doing this, figuring, oh, we'll just go in, make a couple of sales, and leave. Well, you do that once, you do that twice, and you sort of forget, and then the country sort of catches up with you and say, hey, you're doing business in my country. where's our taxes? And you haven't, and well, then you're into fun and games.
It's not just Quebec that has all these taxes. It's certainly worldwide.
Absolutely.
So when people, you always hear the story, say, okay, Quebec is the highest tax, let's find a different jurisdiction. Maybe my business can operate, whether it's Hong Kong or whether it's New Zealand or whether it's Australia or somewhere in Europe. But it's not necessarily that easy, and it's not necessarily that much cheaper once you take into account all the taxes that come into play.
That's right. You really, many times we focus on the income tax, the tax on profits. But profits is, as Josh, as you know, as an accountant, profits can mean a lot of things. It could be a lot of numbers. And the tax rates as well could be could be very different numbers. So you can turn around and say I have a 20% tax rate, but there might be all these other taxes that are attached to, say, your payroll or to your purchases of assets, or that really move your tax rate much higher. Or just the definition of profit. You have to get into the country's definition of what is a profit that we're going to tax. You may think you made $1, but the country says, well, no, we really look at it as $2. Now pay your tax on that. But once a Canadian entrepreneur is getting into these other countries, Canada has a network of tax conventions with most industrial countries. There's not that many that we don't have these agreements. And these agreements basically say, notwithstanding our various laws, you will only tax my resident company when this and this happens. And therefore, and by establishing these rules, we basically look to avoid having, say, China decide we want to tax you on everything, and having Canada say, but we're going to tax you on the same stuff. It's double tax. And that is something that becomes very important.
And there's no question. I mean, and then these agreements, these treaties, these conventions are really not thin and easy to read. There's lots into them. And when we come back after the break, we'll chat a little bit more about some of these challenges of having that international corporate structure.
And Jamie Kerr's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur that's coming up.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's entrepreneur. This evening, Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom will have his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur in a moment. But first, final thoughts from Nick Moraitis, tax partner at Fuller Landau, on some of those international tax challenges.
And there's no doubt, if you start creating a structure, you have other companies, whether it's subsidiary or sister company or something. There's always a couple of things for me that come to mind. One is mind and management. Where is the direction really coming from? Is it local? Is it from afar? And how does that affect the tax base? So I guess my first question to you, Nick, is mind and management. How much of a role does that play?
A big one, unless your treaty, like our treaty with the U.S., basically says that if the company was incorporated in our country, well, then it's for us to tax. Never mind where your mind and management is. Mind and management is who's really leading the company, who's doing the strategic decisions,
who's pulling the strings.
That's right, and that dictates where is the company a resident of. So if you do set up a Chinese company, or let's say it was in Hong Kong, where I know with the treaty in Hong Kong that is an issue. So you set up a Hong Kong company, but every single decision and the strategic decisions, who pays the dividend, are we acquiring companies, are we selling companies, is done here in Montreal. That company will be viewed under the treaty as a resident of Canada, and Canada will tax those profits under our treaty. So that does become something very important. The other thing which I'm going to throw in, you don't see it as much in the mid-sized market, the entrepreneur market. Obviously, as you see it a lot more in the multinationals, is when you start creating these companies all over the world to do different things, you get into the sensitive issue of transfer pricing. What does the company in China say going to charge the Canadian company for the good that it's making for it, and then what's the Canadian company going to charge to the ultimate client? Obviously, if you can play around with those prices, different countries get different amounts of taxes based upon those profits. That is probably the biggest issue that's happening. I think even under the G20, that's one of their discussion points, is how do we stop where I think in the UK, where you saw Apple the coffee retailer not pay any tax in the UK for years, although their stores are all over the place. I forgot the name now. It's Starbucks. Thank you very much. And it turns out that the way they structured their operations allows their profits to be earned in tax havens. and which is perfectly legal, and perfectly economically sound. But countries are now starting to react to that, and that is something that you have to look at when you're expanding internationally.
Always something to look at. As we come to our last moments of the show, we'll turn to Jamie Kerr and from Fabco Custom and ask you, Jamie, what would be your piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
Always take care of your own business. Always be there to take care of your own business, mostly when you're overseas. And if you're not boots on the ground, your face in your own product, it's going to fail. So you don't want to fail.
Excellent. Thank you. And my quick takeaway, Dan, and first of all, I wish we could listen to far more stories in China. I know I've lived some of them as well as I go next week. But also it's Jamie knows what he knows and he understands what he doesn't know. And he brought in a partner, he brought in some help to realize and do the things that he doesn't do so well by somebody else.
Thanks very much, Josh. Thanks to Jamie Kerr of Fabco Custom and Nick Moraitis at Fuller Landau for stopping by, guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week, Monday nights at 7 here for today's Entrepreneur on CJAD.